It was late November, bitter cold, when I first stepped foot into the old fabric factory at the edge of town. Everyone in Whitmore knew about its past, the unexplained accidents, strange disappearances, whispers of ghostly figures, but nobody spoke openly. I'd landed a job as the night supervisor, managing maintenance crews and keeping the facility secure. The factory, dormant since its closure 5 years ago, had been revived by a new investor. Rumors said he ignored the warnings about the place. Perhaps, if he had known what was waiting inside, he'd have thought twice. My first night shift began uneventfully. However, as midnight approached, I felt an unsettling change in the atmosphere. The temperature plummeted sharply, colder than the chill outside. As I paced through the dimly lit corridors, shadows danced across rusting machinery. The air carried a faint metallic smell, mixed oddly with something stale, almost rotten. As I approached the largest hall, Machine Hall, a sudden crash echoed loudly, startling me. A tool chest had toppled over, scattering tools across the floor, though no one else was around. Curious yet apprehensive, I checked around but saw nothing unusual. Still, I felt as if hidden eyes watched my every move. That unsettling sensation clung to me as I finished my rounds, increasingly convinced I was not alone. In the days that followed, strange occurrences multiplied. Equipment malfunctioned inexplicably, lights flickered constantly, and objects moved when no eyes watched them. Workers complained of feeling watched, even stalked. One technician, Jack, swore he'd seen a dark figure darting between the old weaving machines. It looked human, but impossibly fast, he insisted, his voice shaking as he spoke. Initially skeptical, I started reviewing security camera footage, hoping to calm nerves. Yet, what I found left me unnerved. Shadows moved independently, forming shapes resembling people, lingering near equipment. Most disturbing was footage from Machine Hall. A figure stood motionless, facing a wall for hours, then suddenly darted out of frame. My rational explanations dwindled. It became increasingly clear the factory was haunted. Digging deeper into local archives, I discovered troubling details. Decades earlier, rumors spoke of mistreatment, dangerous working conditions, and multiple mysterious disappearances. People whispered that those who vanished had never truly left the factory. One evening, as heavy rain pounded against the roof, I was inspecting the boiler room. Suddenly, a faint whisper brushed past my ear. "Get out." Chills cascaded down my spine. Turning sharply, flashlight trembling in hand, I saw nothing but shadows cast by flickering bulbs. I dismissed it initially, attributing the whisper to imagination or wind through cracks. Yet, the voice persisted, growing louder, more urgent with each night. Workers resigned abruptly, citing nightmares, unexplained injuries, and horrifying visions. Soon, only a handful remained, including myself, desperately attempting to rationalize the irrational. Sleep became impossible. Nightmares plagued me, always the same vision, dark silhouettes reaching for me, machinery closing in, trapping me helplessly. Even awake, shadows moved at the edge of my vision, and the whispers echoed endlessly through the corridors. I began researching the factory's history further, discovering that 50 years earlier, a tragic accident claimed 7 lives in Machine Hall. Reports describe machinery inexplicably turning on, workers unable to escape as if held by unseen hands. The newspapers called it a horrific accident. But was it? One bitterly cold night, as snow blanketed the factory grounds, I was alone in Machine Hall. My flashlight flickered erratically, eventually dying, plunging me into darkness. a feeling of dread surged within me, heavy and suffocating. Then the whispers began again, louder and closer. "Join us." Panic flooded me. Blindly, I stumbled toward the exit, but heavy machinery started roaring to life around me. Looms activated, gears spun violently, deafeningly loud. I screamed, calling desperately for help, but my voice drowned beneath the mechanical chaos. Turning, I saw them clearly for the first time. 7 figures, shadows with burning red eyes, emerging from the darkness, silently reaching out to me. I felt cold, invisible hands clutching at my clothing, dragging me toward the spinning gears. With all my remaining strength, I tore away, sprinting blindly until I reached the factory door, bursting into the frozen air, collapsing, gasping for breath. The next morning, authorities found me unconscious, frostbitten, and terrified, refusing initially to talk about what I'd experienced. The police were skeptical, attributing my claims to trauma-induced hallucinations. But the workers believed me instantly, their fears validated. That very day, many quit, refusing ever to step foot in the factory again. Haunted by my experiences, I began to investigate even further, uncovering hidden files buried deep within city records. Horrifyingly, I learned the 7 lost workers had been deliberately trapped inside Machine Hall, victims of sabotage by an owner desperate to conceal illegal activities. Their spirits had lingered, tormented and vengeful, seeking justice. After that revelation, I never returned to the factory. Unable to suppress the growing unease, the investors soon abandoned the facility. Unable to retain workers, officially, the factory closed again due to financial difficulties, but the truth was whispered behind closed doors. Whitmore had always known the truth. Today, the factory stands abandoned, Machine Hall sealed shut. Yet, on quiet winter nights, people claim they still hear whispers and machinery humming from within. The shadows remain, trapped forever inside, waiting patiently for someone else to step into their dark embrace. The massive iron doors groaned closed behind me, echoing through the hollow expanse of the abandoned steelworks factory. I'd been hired as a night watchman only 3 weeks earlier, drawn by the surprisingly generous pay that outweighed my discomfort with solitary nighttime patrols. Every creak, every echo seemed to amplify my anxieties. Tonight, however, the unsettling feeling was unusually intense. Something felt off, an oppressive heaviness hanging thickly in the air. I flicked on my flashlight, cutting a pale beam through the darkness that seemed reluctant to retreat. The factory had been silent for over a decade, yet whispers claimed it still hummed with life, or rather, something resembling it. Workers told tales of unexplained shadows and machinery that turned itself on without warning. I had dismissed these as mere urban legends, tales spun by bored workers, until tonight. Walking past towering machines shrouded in dusty tarps, I felt an icy chill wrap around me. A sudden clang resonated from the distance, sharp and loud. My breath caught in my throat. Turning quickly, the flashlight shaking in my hand, I searched for the source but saw only rusting metal and shadows playing tricks on my eyes. "Who's there?" My voice echoed emptily, sounding frail against the factory's vast silence. No reply came, only a distant whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. Cautiously, I stepped forward, my feet crunching against loose gravel scattered across the cracked concrete floor. Each echoing step heightened my dread. fueling a sense of vulnerability I couldn't shake. Another metallic clang erupted, louder and closer this time, almost deafening. Each step felt heavier than the last as I moved deeper into the factory. My mind raced, heart pounding against my ribs. Rational thoughts wrestled against rising panic. "You're imagining things," I muttered to myself, attempting to calm the nerves jangling with each creak and whisper. Suddenly, the soft hum of machinery startled me. Impossible. None of the equipment had power. I approached a large steel press, the humming growing louder. Its old buttons, covered in grime, suddenly glowed dimly, flickering faintly like dying embers. Without warning, the machine jolted alive, its massive hydraulic arms slamming down violently, sending sparks dancing across the floor. I jumped backward, nearly falling over scattered debris. "This can't be happening," I gasped, eyes wide in disbelief. The machine abruptly ceased movement, plunging back into silence, as if mocking my terror. "Leave," a whisper hissed sharply near my ear. Spinning around, I saw only shadows retreating. The flashlight shook violently in my hand. Desperation took hold of me, and despite my fear, I needed answers. My feet moved almost involuntarily towards a small office at the far end, hoping to find clues. My heart screamed to flee, yet curiosity, or perhaps madness, pulled me toward the basement entrance. Rumors said the worst sightings came from below, from deep within the heart of the factory, where accidents had once claimed lives. Shaking fingers grasped the cold metal handle of the basement door, pulling it open with a loud, protesting screech. Darkness swallowed me as I descended the rusted stairs, flashlight barely piercing the thick gloom. The basement air was frigid, the smell of rust and decay overwhelming. Suddenly, a low moan resonated through the underground chambers, sorrowful yet deeply unsettling. Who's there?" I called out, voice trembling. The moan intensified, echoing from every corner. The shadows around me shifted strangely, twisting and contorting as if alive. I spun wildly, panic clawing at my chest. "Please, what do you want?" "Release us," a voice rasped, strained and mournful, echoing all around me. I stumbled further into the darkness, flashlight sweeping erratically. The walls were lined with old lockers, each rusted shut and covered in layers of grime. Suddenly, one locker rattled violently, its door swinging open with a loud bang. I nearly dropped my flashlight, its beam illuminating the contents. An old worker's uniform, smeared with something dark and dried. Stumbling deeper into the basement, driven by fear and desperation to escape whatever haunted presence pursued me, I tripped over something solid. My flashlight revealed bones, scattered in a corner like discarded rubbish. I recoiled, horror seizing my lungs. "We died here," the voice echoed, softer now, filled with sadness. "Trapped, forgotten." From behind rusted machinery, dark silhouettes emerged, their translucent forms wavering like smoke. Ghostly figures with hollow eyes stared silently, reaching toward me with pleading gestures. My legs gave way beneath me, sending me sprawling backward against cold stone. "Help us," they murmured, voices blending in painful harmony. "How?" I choked, terror mingling with compassion. The apparitions pointed collectively toward a rusted lever protruding from the wall. "Set us free." Gathering my remaining courage, I stumbled toward the lever, The oppressive atmosphere intensified as I grasped the cold metal, my breath visible in the freezing air. Every nerve screamed to stop, yet I pulled with desperate strength. A loud, resounding boom echoed through the basement. Pipes groaned, walls trembled, and an overwhelming sense of release surged through the air. The ghostly figures shimmered, their expressions shifting from torment to peace. "Thank you," the voices whispered gently, fading slowly into silence. I ascended the staircase, each step lighter than before. As I reached the top, I glanced back one last time into the darkness below, where a soft glow briefly illuminated the shadows, signaling their final departure. The factory fell quiet once more, but the weight in the air had vanished. Exhausted and shaken, I fled up the stairs, not daring to look back until I burst through the factory doors into the crisp night air. I never returned after that night, resigning immediately, but I'll never forget the faces of those souls finally set free, nor the echoes of a past tragedy resolved at last. Steel Hollow manufacturing wasn't just old, it felt ancient. The walls were smeared with grime, the ceilings cracked in places from years of vibration and neglect. I started working the night shift there 2 years ago, right after my divorce. I needed solitude and money. Steel Hollow offered both, though I quickly learned it also offered something else. Something no one wanted to talk about. The first few weeks were uneventful. Long hours, bad coffee, creaky floors. Frank was the kind of foreman who barked more than he spoke, but he wasn't a bad guy. Mira was efficient, quiet, and always wore headphones. Said the silence got too loud. Devin was a night owl like me. Sarcastic, always pacing with a clipboard. Then there was Carl. He didn't do much anymore, mostly just checked the machinery, but he had an edge in his eyes, like someone who had seen too much and couldn't forget it. He always warned us about the West Corridor, grinning. "She still walks, you know, especially if you whistle." About a month in, things began to shift. I noticed the way sound traveled differently in the West Corridor. Conversations echoed longer. Footsteps sounded like they multiplied. Sometimes I swore I heard my own name whispered from the vents. I chalked it up to sleep deprivation. Graveyard shifts mess with your head. Then came that night. I stayed late doing inventory. The time was 2:10 a.m. I remember because I glanced at the clock before heading to the supply room. That's when I heard it. Heels clicking against the concrete, slow, deliberate. I assumed Mira had returned, but when I checked, no one was there. The sound had vanished, and so had the warmth. I stood at the mouth of the West Corridor, feeling the air pull downward like something sucking the life out of the space. I turned to leave, but then came the whistle. High-pitched, eerie, almost mournful. My skin prickled. I didn't breathe. It came from the old furnace room, the one locked for decades. The next day, Frank didn't show up. I figured he was late. By lunch, we started to get concerned. Mira went to his place, said everything was as if he'd just stepped out for milk. Lights on, dinner half eaten, phone charging. But Frank himself, gone, not a trace. That same night, Mira swore she heard someone crying inside the break room vents. She left mid-shift and didn't come back. Devin and I were rattled. "Maybe Frank just bailed," I said, unsure even of my own voice. But Devin wasn't having it. "This place isn't right, man. It's hungry. That's the word he used. Hungry. We started to notice new things. Tools misplaced. The emergency lights flickering without cause. The same whistle, always from behind closed doors. We laughed it off during the day. But at night, we walked faster, stuck to lit areas, and avoided the west corridor altogether. Carl approached me differently after that. No more casual warnings. He was serious now. That night, he pulled me into the back room and shut the door. She was real, he said, his voice cracking. Her name was Eleanor. She worked maintenance in the early 80s, got stuck in Furnace 4 during a misfire. They sealed it not knowing she was inside, turned it on. I sat stunned. What happened after that? I asked. Carl lit a cigarette, stared into nothing. They found her later, or what was left. It melted to the floor. No one was punished. No one even reported it. They wrote it off as an accident. But things started happening after that. Whispers, cold spots. Then came the siren. It used to ring randomly at 3 a.m. just once. Every time it did, someone left or disappeared. He leaned forward. And the whistling, that's how she used to signal when she was trapped. I should have left. Everything told me to. But a part of me needed to know. Needed to believe there was a reason behind all of it. That week, I brought a handheld recorder and hid it in my coat pocket. I waited in the break room, sipping coffee with trembling hands. At exactly 3:00 a.m., it happened again. The old emergency siren, screaming through the factory. Lights went red. And then, boom, silence. No machines. No fans, just oppressive stillness. I turned on my flashlight and ran to the west corridor. The air was heavy, like standing underwater. I whispered into the recorder, "If anyone finds this, I think she's real." Then I heard the whistle, right behind me. But when I spun around, nothing, only cold. And a shadow moving against the wall without a source. I ran back to the control room, heart racing. The siren hadn't activated from the panel. No electrical surge. Nothing. Devin was the next to vanish. No messages. No warnings. Just gone. His locker untouched. His jacket still hung over his chair. The plant manager said he probably just quit. But that made 3 people now. I was alone. Carl started avoiding me. He'd disappear for hours, then show up behind me without warning, muttering things like, "It's too late now," or "She remembers your voice." I began having dreams, or maybe visions, of a woman covered in ash, skin fused to bone, eyes missing, mouth stretched open in eternal scream. I'd wake soaked in sweat, hearing faint whistling from outside my window, even though I lived 10 miles from the plant. Once I saw handprints on the fogged bathroom mirror. Too high to be mine, too thin to be a man's. I went back one last time. Couldn't stop myself. Brought candles, old blueprints, and Carl's journal. I lit a candle in front of Furnace 4, my recorder on the floor. I whispered an apology, a thank you, a goodbye. Then, without thinking, I whistled. Instantly, the air twisted around me like a tornado of breath and smoke. I heard her screaming, not with sound, but inside my skull. She rushed me, blackened, eyeless, reaching. I fell back, hitting my head. Everything went black. When I woke, I was in my car outside. Engine running, door open. The factory gates were locked behind me. I never went back. The plant shut down a week later. Official reason, structural damage. but I know the truth. Every so often, I still hear that whistle in my sleep, a descending call in the dark. She's still there, waiting, and she remembers me.